All right. Can everyone hear me? If you can hear me, just type in, let's do this. Yes, okay, we got some yeses, awesome. Thank you all for joining. I'm so excited. I'm going to, hold on. Going to invite a very special human being on the screen with me. This is our very first episode of a conversation series that I dreamed up.
Yay.
And here we have Adam Robinson. Thank you for joining. Wonderful. So we're really in episode 1 of a phenomenal time, unlike anything we've seen in this generation. And so I thought it would be appropriate to kick off the New Now Live Talks with Vika with Adam Robinson, who is one of the most creative, out-of-the-box thinkers that I know, and certainly in the world. Adam's background is pretty phenomenal. He was a Grand Chess Master. He also is the co-founder of the Princeton Review. He is the trusted advisor to heads of some of the biggest hedge funds in the world. He's a whiz at markets and, more importantly, magic. He's a New York Times best-selling author and has several books that are coming out. And above all, he's just deeply in love with humanity. And so when Adam and I talk about the things that are happening that are shaping the world, it's his perspective that I count on to really push my eyes open. And in his Twitter, if you follow him, I am Adam Robinson, on all of his tweets, he leaves this little bit of mystery. So the vision that I have of today's episode is really to ask curious questions. So in this first part, Adam and I are going to be discussing the questions that I have specifically around fear-mongering media, Black Swan events, how all of his backgrounds have a common denominator, why the world has gone crazy, and how he can trace this back to 5,000 years. So those are just appetizer portions to give you guys a taste, but I'm going to hand it over to Adam. Yeah. How are you feeling?
Great. I can't help myself.
So with your background, given that you have done so many things across a lot of different categories, what would you say is the common denominator that pulls it all together?
An abiding interest in the human mind and in thinking. And Einstein said that world out there is the product of our thinking. And unless we change our thinking, we can't change the world. And which is, good insofar as, he went, but he offered no guidance on how to change that. How do you change thinking? And in fact, how do you change the thinking of a planet? And I've given a lot of thought to that, from my days changing the thinking of students to my days now in predicting global markets. So everything reflects human action, and human action reflects thought. So.
Okay. And one of the things that you're really passionate is this book you're writing about how not to be stupid. And it's not just your average book. Warren Buffett endorsed it. Can you explain why would Warren Buffett endorse that book specifically of all your books?
Well, he said the information was important to get out there in the world. And, he said this book is loaded with good ideas and appropriate warnings. And one of the problems with warnings, one of my dear friends, R.P. Eddy and Richard Clark, wrote a book called Warnings, just that. And the history of the human species is that we don't pay attention to warnings. And the German poet Schiller said, "Against stupidity, the gods themselves struggle in vain." And all of Greek and Roman mythology is basically one god or another telling one mortal or another, don't do that, right? Pandora, don't open the box. Yeah. Oedipus, don't go down that road. Don't do that. And the mortal, knowing it was a god, warning him or her, said, thanks so much, and goes off and does it. And so the history of the human species is that I was going to say we don't learn lessons, but that's incorrect. Hegel said we learn from history, that we don't learn from history. But it's much worse than that. Hegel was wrong. We learn the wrong lessons, and we think we're smarter. And then we move forward with even more momentum, more resources. And in fact, this is a bit of a paradox. We move stupidly forward with more intelligence because our technology allows us to do anything we want faster, with more efficiency. And it's one of the reasons that the world is in peril. You know, Gandhi said, there must be more to life than making the world faster. And I would agree. So anyway, that's why Buffett, who has a lifelong policy of not endorsing really anything, said, get this out there. So that's what I'm doing.
What do you think, and I'm glad you're doing this work because it's so needed. What do you think the warning is right now that people are missing? A lot of your texts have alluded to that. Well, you know, on November 6th, Ray Dalio, who runs Bridgewater, the world's largest hedge fund, wrote a blog piece on November 6th last year. And he said, the world has gone mad and the system is broken. And I talked actually about this with our mutual friend, Tim Ferriss, back in December 2016, 3 years ago. And I talked about the notion of things that don't make sense. And what Dalio was saying is the world doesn't make sense to me. And really what that betrays is his model of the world made no sense. In other words, the world was acting differently from what he expected, what his model of the world said it should be doing. And everyone is bewildered by the world. And with Tim, I discussed that when things don't make sense, it's a sign that something very powerful is at work. And it's one of the things going on in the world. And while we try to understand it, we're on the wrong side either of the trade or the unfolding of the world. In fact, our model of the world, when things don't make sense, we're literally blind to what is right in front of us. And, you know, my book, How Not to Be Stupid, I define stupidity as overlooking or dismissing conspicuously crucial information. It's crucial information, so you've got to pay attention to it. And it's right in front of your nose. And you either don't see it or you see it and you dismiss it. And that's what's going on in the world right now. And things that don't make sense. And no one is taking a step back and actually looking at what is going on. So one of the great challenges actually is not thinking or understanding. It's simply seeing what's going on in the world. And people who say the world is crazy are, the world isn't crazy. The world is a perfectly rational response of human beings to the situation they've been put in and the incentives that have been placed before them. So yeah. So when we say that the world is going mad, it's not that the world is going mad, it's that the people are going mad in response to a series of neutral events, if I'm hearing you correctly. No, the people are, their response is perfectly rational. And but when you say the world has gone mad, really you're saying that your understanding of the world is at odds with what's going on. And yet people thinking the world has gone mad take action within it. And that's very dangerous. So anyway, so there. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Some of the audience is curious, what are the signals that we're missing right now? Well, for one, Sir John Templeton, and it sounds like I'm talking a lot about investing, but in fact, this is actually what's going on in the world is a spiritual crisis. And we'll find out, we'll trace everything from negative interest rates to the coronavirus, to Brexit, to
the state of the world, we can trace it back actually to the start of civilization, say 3000 BC, something like that, the start of writing. And more recently, we can trace it to 1946, 1986, and I'll tell you the key events: 1946, 1986, 1989, 1974, 1987, 2000, 2007, 2018, and 2020. All those events we're going to come back to and see how they trace a logical progression of a mistake made hundreds of years ago, but certainly one that we can trace to the end of World War II. So it's really a spiritual crisis. So you asked me a question about the world, and the one thing they're not seeing is negative interest rates. So negative interest rates, just so you get a handle on this, it's when borrowers are paid to borrow money. Mm-hmm. Lenders pay for the privilege of lending borrowers money. And when people hear about that, they go, oh, that's strange. That's weird. That's crazy. But it's not crazy. It's a sign of how bad things are in the world. Right. And you'll hear economists talk about, when's the next recession coming? Are you kidding me? They've got negative interest rates just to hold the world together. And here's a factoid for you. Up till a few weeks ago, we were at a record low unemployment in the United States. And it seemed that the economy was doing pretty well, maybe recovering more slowly than it had from previous expansions, but nonetheless, record low unemployment. And the stock market was at all-time highs. But it was a house of cards waiting to get yanked down. To give you an example, 48% of American adults have $0 in the bank. That's at record low unemployment, which means record high employment. 48% of American adults have $0 in the bank. When I say zero, I don't mean a little bit. I mean nothing. And they live literally paycheck to paycheck. And another 21% have less than $1,000. So if you do the math, 69% of Americans, 69% of American adults have less than $1,000 in the bank. And I'm guessing, since we've all gone quarantine, this is all like that movie in 1981, Escape from New York, right? Or Escape from LA. I think that was that Kurt Russell classic, 1996 or something. And anyway, we've gone all locked down, and I'll bet you a lot of that $1,000 is gone in provisions. And so at the best we can do with a full employment economy, with trillions of dollars thrown at it, people have no money. And that's in the best of times. And clearly, we're about to enter a whole new realm. When interest rates went negative, you would have thought that the collective leaders of the world would have said, you know what, we got to really time out. Things aren't making sense. If I were to drop, I have a marker here. If I were to drop this and it were to rise, and assuming there was no magic involved, we would say that gravity ceased to work, at least right in front of Adam's face. And if gravity is not working, what else isn't working? Right? And so the fact that there were negative interest rates should have told everyone, you know what, we are in Wonderland. This is Alice in Wonderland territory, which means all economic models of the world, you just toss them out the window. So anyone, in fact, operating on those models is out to sea. So, yeah, and unfortunately, we've piled up a lot of debt to keep afloat a world that isn't answering human needs. I don't want to talk just economics, right? I want to talk about the spiritual crisis going on. And so sorry. Next. Yeah. Next.
I agree with you. I think the reason this is so challenging right now is because there were these pre-existing conditions that are now being exacerbated by what people are calling a black swan event. Now, I know you had a particular feeling that this is not a black swan event. Can you explain why?
Well, yes. It's the logical consequence of a world that optimizes for growth. So I said the world is not sustainable, but it was never really viable, the modern world. And in 1946, the end of World War II, American GIs came home, and the world was trying to rebuild from devastation. You know, the combined effects of a protracted depression and a global war. And we fostered the American dream. And the American dream was, I want what my parents had. I just want more of it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I want happiness. I don't want fulfillment. I don't want love even. I just want more. And so the American dream was predicated on the willingness of the US consumer to go into debt to buy things he didn't need. Right? If my parents had a home, I want 2 homes and a boat and a vacation home, and then I'll be happy. I just want more. And debt works if you can grow. And we've piled up so much debt in the world, and it's predicated on unlimited growth. That's the problem. And so the world that we set up over the last 75 years, since the end of World War II, has been predicated on unlimited growth. And there are only 2 sources of growth: population growth and consumption growth. So again, let's say you buy a home and you take out a mortgage, and that's okay because you know that the value of a home always goes up. If I were to ask the people listening, does real estate always go up? Most people would say, of course, like real estate has to go up. There are more people in the world. There's a limited amount of real estate, and there are more people. So real estate always has to go up in value. They're sure of this. This is an axiom. And they're about to get a very rude awakening right now. Real estate can go down for decades. And so again, by the way, I realize I'm opening up lots of parentheses. I promise everyone listening that we will tie all of these parentheses, we'll close all of them and tie it all together. So at the end of World War II, we started going into debt as consumers, as a country. So consumers went into debt, corporations went into debt, and the country went into debt because we would grow forever. We were sure of that. And so we grew, we did, but then we just piled up more debt. It's not like we paid down the old debt. Imagine that every time your house increased in value, you took out another loan. You'd be in trouble, because if that house ever went down in value, you'd have to pay off those loans and you'd lose money. And so what's gone on is we've piled up a massive amount of debt. And that's, again, okay, as long as we keep going. But what happens if we stop? And in fact, what happens if growth goes negative? And right now, there are only 2 sources of growth in the world. We need more people, or we need each person, and we need each person to consume more. And both of those have gone negative and are accelerating to the downside. So in every developed country in the world, so by that I mean the US, Australia, Canada, Japan, and all of Europe, more people will be born this year. Sorry, more people will die this year than will be born. Those countries are all shrinking. And that's a big problem because we piled up a lot of debt, remember, assuming we would grow forever. And you're going to see how this leads to everything, including the black swan coronavirus. So we piled up all this debt, assuming we would grow forever. And right now, every developed country in the world is shrinking in size, is shrinking. And even the developing world, and I hate that distinction, but I'll just use it, the developing world, the only countries that are growing still are in Africa and the Middle East. And even their growth rate is sharply decelerating. So even, I forget, it's another 10 or 20 years, there's a blog, Economica, and I'm sure you'll provide links at the end for anyone who wants to see it. The economist there, I think his name is Hamilton, he calls it a collapse in population. And the demographics are already in place. So we've got a shrinking population and everyone's consuming less. So I think I've got the numbers right on this. A generation ago, young adults under the age of 35 owned 31% of all real estate in the United States, which is about what you'd expect. And today the number is 4%. So adults under the age of 35 basically own no real estate. And that's a logical consequence, not a crazy consequence, of young people not getting married. And if you're not going to, and why aren't they getting married? Because they're not having kids. So if I don't need kids, then I don't really need to get married. And if I'm not going to get married and have kids, I don't need a home. And if I don't need a home, I don't need many things after all, right? I don't have to buy furniture, not that much. And I don't really need a car because there's no garage to put it in, and I can Uber or Lyft anyway. And so consumption is accelerating to the downside. And so because economists and leaders and central bankers don't recognize that the game has changed, this isn't a recession. A recession assumes a normal growth curve, that we're continuing to grow and there's a little downbeat and then we'll resume our growth. But this is the start of something totally new, unprecedented in modern times. And it's not going to change. And the problem is we've piled up a ton of debt. Now, when I say a ton, I'll put it in perspective. Someone 2 years old does not work. Someone 102 in a nursing home does not work and earn money. Someone who's in a developing country might earn $5 a week, something really small. The average debt per human being on the planet, pile it all up, divide it by everybody, including those not working, is $32,000. Yeah. So imagine a family of 6 in some poor country. That family is on the hook for $200,000. $200,000. There's no way that debt is going to be paid back. And so we've piled up a mountain of debt. And every time we collapse, the response of our political and central banks, political leaders and central banks, is to pile up more debt to get out of the problem of the debt we piled up before. And we've kept kicking that can down the road. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of time before everything came down. And what's different now? The legendary investor Sir John Templeton said once, the most dangerous words in investing are, "this time is different." And those are dangerous words, unless this time really is different. And then it's dangerous not to recognize that. And what's different now is that we've got a population collapse. That's real different. And young people are not starting families. And to put that in perspective, China, back in the 50s and 60s, had a one-child policy, right? And each family was permitted one child. And that was a big mistake. And so families had one child, which tended to be more often, not surprisingly, a boy rather than a girl. And you have, as a result, they recognized, about 20 years ago, that was a big mistake. because they had too few young people to support too many old people. And the young people, there was a disproportionate number of men. So there are roughly 11 single men in China for every 9 single women. And that's a problem because it means a lot of men are not going to get married. And even still, China has been encouraging families to procreate, right? Young people get married, have a lot of kids. And that'll be good for the Communist Party, good for the country, and we'll give you tax breaks. And they just released, despite urging of the government to have children, they just released results from last year's census, 2019, that it was the lowest growth rate in modern times. That's with the Chinese government doing everything they could to encourage family creation and childbirth. So this is a problem recognized by all global leaders. And they've kept it afloat, again, by going into debt. But the day of reckoning was coming, and it's probably here. I think the beginning has happened. So there. I know I left a few parentheses open there, so someone can ask a question, or you can ask a question.
Yeah, thank you for that incredible stream of thought. The questions that come to mind are, if not this, then what? What could, because you speak, this might be it, and maybe that's smart to be cautious, but what else, if not for the first time in our generation or the one past, that we are on a global level brought together by the solidarity of fear of this virus, which is also psychologically a dangerous thing and creates certain power shifts and control mechanisms. So what?
Okay, you've asked a bunch of questions, so let me parse that. So the first is, if not this system, then what system? So let's set that aside. And then you talked about the coronavirus and the fear of that. And yes, any virus is terrifying because it's an invisible enemy. And there was, in the United States in the 50s, there was something called the Red Scare, right? The communists, you couldn't tell them. You couldn't, you couldn't tell, even your neighbor might be a communist. You just couldn't tell. And with a virus, by the way, in the 50s, there was a movie, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which was human beings were invaded by an alien pod, and you couldn't tell that a human being was actually a host for an alien. And but it was the same notion of a Red Scare. You couldn't tell who you could trust. And so a virus is even more dangerous because it's airborne. And especially this whole notion of, it's a notion, it's a fact. The incubation period is, 10 days, 9-10 days, which means you could be a carrier and not even have the symptoms and be dangerous. So the human species has survived, Darwin, I think, got it wrong, competition and survival of the fittest. It's really the human species survived and became what it did from coordinated cooperation and banding together and solving the problems that confronted us. And so one of the tragedies of this and the quarantining is it separated human beings when connectedness and coming together and thinking through problems has never been more critical. And so, as to your first question about if not this, then what? I think the secret to life is, and it doesn't matter whether it's as an individual in your relationships or as a company, in your business or a country, it's the ability to paint a picture of a future that other people want to be a part of. Someone, it doesn't matter, again, whether it's a romantic partnership or a company, and someone else saying, yeah, I want a piece of you, or I want a piece of that, Tesla company or whatever, or I want a piece of this community. And what's not seen in the world now is leadership insofar as a positive, compelling vision of the future, where people go, yeah, I want a part of that, right? I want in on that. And the American dream has been rejected. And by the way, it's unfair to say it's the American dream. It became the global dream, has now been rejected by everyone. And I said a spiritual crisis because the entire world is not answering human needs. So we've piled up this mountain of debt. And the American dream is based on consumption and unlimited growth, making things bigger and faster. And it's left the human heart empty, lost, and crushed. And one of the hallmarks, it's a global depression, and I mean that as a state of mind. One of the hallmarks of depression is an inability to imagine that things can be any different. One of the hallmarks of depression, you're in pain and you can't imagine that it's going to be any different. And I live, this is tragic, I live in Tribeca in New York, although right now I'm in LA. At Petit Hermitage, my favorite haunts. And I live 5 blocks in New York from the old World Trade Center. And when that went down, that I was right there. And yesterday, someone in my building in New York jumped out of his apartment on the 16th floor. And the note was, I just heard this in my building in New York. He was quarantined, and something about what is there to enjoy anymore. And there's such psychic pain already in the world, even before the coronavirus. This is not an economic problem. It's not a health problem. The fact that the coronavirus was allowed to escape is a consequence of the world we find ourselves in, a world of our creation, a world of our thinking, which again comes back to, if you want to change the world, you have to change the thinking in it. And there are only 2 ways. Einstein offered no guidance on how to do that. There are only 2 ways to change thinking. You either change the questions people are asking, or you offer them more inspired answers. Everything is an answer to a question. This glass of water, right here, glass of water, an answer to a question. What can I drink that is going to slake my thirst? There are other things. I could have had a beer there, or a glass of orange juice, any number of things. But that was the answer that I chose. Democracy is an answer to a question. Los Angeles is an answer to a question. This podcast is an answer to a question. Marriage is an answer to a question. I belabor that point because everything in the world, everything human, is an answer to one or more questions. And the entire world is the sum total of all the answers we've been able to come up with as a species, all of them. And it's not working, really not working for too many people. And yes, there might be enlightened villages somewhere in the world who are at peace and in harmony with their souls and with the world. But the vast majority of citizens, inhabitants of this planet, are lost and angry. And again, that anger has a spiritual source. And I want to invite everyone. Vika, we had talked about doing a Google experiment.
Yes.
Can you pull up your screen?
Yeah.
And everyone can do this at home. And about a year ago, I went to Google. I wanted to see what people were interested in learning how to do. So I went to Google, and if you allow Google to autofill the page, can you pull up your screen there, Vika?
Yep. Moment, I am going to share.
By the way, it doesn't matter because you can do this at home, everybody, but I'll do it on my phone. So if you go to Google and you pull up the search bar, so everyone, you can do this on your phone. You pull up the Google search bar. You type in, how can I learn to, but don't hit enter. How can I learn to? How can I learn to? And it's in ranked order. The autofill is in ranked order. And I'll start with number 2, and then I'll go back to number 1. So number 2, there's some feedback there. Number 2 is how can I learn to sing? 3 is how can I learn to speak Spanish? How to code? Number 5 begins to get sad. How can I learn to trust again? Number 6, how can I learn to sleep on my back? How can I learn to drive? How can I learn to draw? But it was number 1 that's the saddest. And the most popular response was, how can I learn to love myself? Yep. And think about the pain of people where that's, how can I learn to, how can I learn to sing? How can I learn to play the ukulele? How can I learn to do a backflip? How can I learn to ask for a raise? And the number 1 thing was, how can I learn to love myself? That's tragic. Mind you, this whole world has been constructed, and we've piled up this massive amount of debt to answer questions that human beings ask.
We could also...
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on that. There's a phenomenal documentary called Century of the Self that really traces back the birth of a new kind of capitalism to the beginning of the century, when a PR maven who actually founded PR as we know it today, Edward Bernays.
Yep, I know the book, yep.
Yep, was tasked with the tobacco companies' need to get women purchasing tobacco, which was really a taboo back then. And so he called up his cousin, who happened to be Sigmund Freud, and they employed psychological warfare, essentially, against the American people. And over the course of the next 2 decades, they were able to turn America from a need-based economy to a want-based economy by feeding into egoic fears, needs, and insecurities. So you're totally...
Yeah.
Yeah, I think...
yeah, but I agree with you, and I'm familiar with the book, and he was, psychologically brilliant, twisted end. But the ills of the modern world are not attributable to their moving us away from needs to wants. After all, Maslow's need hierarchy is pretty much the same thing. I'll take care of the things that I need, right? Survival skills. And as I move up the ladder, I move to things that I just want. And after all, that should be okay. That should be okay. After all, one would think that the summit of human aspiration would be where I can do truly what I want to do, so insofar as it doesn't infringe on other people's rights, and not things that I have to do. So the ills of the modern world are not attributable to that. You could argue that accelerated it. But I don't think that we can lay the spiritual crisis in the world at the foot of Bernays and Sigmund Freud. And I'd like to go back to Google and go back to the feeling state. So if we go to Google, when I saw that, and this was about a year ago, I was so horrified that people were asking Google, how can I learn to love myself? That I typed in, I wanted to find out the feelings that they were feeling. So I typed in, why do I feel so? And again, that's something that everyone can do. Why do I feel so? And I'll try to show it. Maybe it'll show up. Oh, it's showing up backwards, but I'll just read it. Why do I feel so tired, alone, bloated, cold, weak, empty, dizzy, sad? The number one response, why do I feel tired? That's a euphemism for depression. And when people are depressed, especially men, and they're not self-aware, they don't admit that they're depressed. They go, I'm not depressed. I just don't have any energy. I don't feel like doing anything. And so essentially everyone's asking, why am I so depressed, alone, depressed, empty? That's existential depression, and sad, depressed. And in other words, the entire world that we've constructed over millennia is not answering the human soul's needs. And then now type in one last question in the Google experiment. I wondered, what do individual human beings see when they look out at the world? So type in, why is everyone else? So why is everyone else so? Okay, so why is everyone else so? First response is kind of interesting, bad at eating. But now, number two, why is everyone else so pretty, skinny, talented, happy, lucky, perfect? Better than me. So everyone is depressed, lonely, right? There's a loneliness epidemic. Why is everyone depressed, lonely, and lost, and thinks that everyone else in the world is perfect and happy? And that's the state of the modern world. And that's horrifying. And so we've got this house of cards. We've built up this massive mountain of debt to buy things we didn't really need, and have left us at the end of the day depressed, lonely, lost, and angry. There's a lot of anger in the world, and that too has a spiritual source. If the world is an answer to our questions that we've asked as a species, and it's left us lost and depressed, people are angry about that, real angry. And so at a time when we need human connection, it's never been more centrifugal. Everything's flying apart. Women are angry with men. Republicans are angry with Democrats and vice versa. People in cities are angry with people in rural areas and vice versa. The poor are angry with the rich. The rich are whatever about the poor. Everyone's angry. England was angry with Europe. Europe was angry with America. In fact, everyone's angry with America. And so we've got a world flying apart, full of anger, because nothing's working. And I don't want to say working. Again, nothing has answered the questions that we ought to be asking, which brings us back to Gandhi, right? Gandhi said there must be more to life than making it faster. And that's what we've asked as a species. How can we grow? How can we consume? And even that to me is an obscenity. The notion of a human being as something that just consumes. In fact, a consumer is just a mouth. It just consumes, right? And that's, to me, an obscene notion of a soul. And that's why we're empty and lost and depressed and think everyone else is happy but us. And that's the state of the world. And you asked a question earlier, Vika, it's such a beautiful question. If not this, what? And it goes back to the collective depression, and again, psychological depression, of essentially millennials and Gen Zs who have rejected the world, and that's wise, but they have no vision of an alternative to replace it. And you see these utopian communities, and it's all very well and nice for people who can afford those utopian communities, but we need to devise a planet that's predicated more on making things faster and predicated on things other than consumption. And the problem for the short term is we can't just decide, let's play a new game, because we've piled up the debt and we have special interests that are not going to let us walk away from that. And so that's the state of the world. We have a lot of pain ahead of us.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I think this also gives rise to the question that you and I asked each other: what does human connection look like in the age of isolation?
You know, one of the beautiful things of quarantining is the efforts people make actually to reach each other. And, you know, we all feel it. We all feel the pain of missing actual contact with each other. And it's funny, when we can go outside, most people are glued to their phones, right? You ride a subway in New York, and if it's a subway with 50 people in it, 49 of them have their heads buried in their smartphones, and maybe one person bemused looking at it all. That would be me or you. And so one of the beautiful things now is people realize that they're isolated, and looking at a screen and looking at their phones isn't enough. Like, everyone feels that pain. Like, they feel the pain of not being able to go out, even when in normal times, when they go out, they don't pay too much attention to other people.
Right. I think we're in a crisis of presence. I was studying.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I was studying what is the attention span of the average adult for a talk I was giving, and it's actually fallen by 4 seconds in the last decade. Not surprising.
4 seconds.
4
Wait a
seconds.
second. Wait.
Down to 8 seconds.
Oh, 8 seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Then I've lost people about, I don't know, 42 minutes ago or something.
No, you're captivating.
Okay, wow.
But what I'm really curious about is, what is the larger vision that you have for the world? Because a lot of what's happening is the fear-mongering media.
Okay. Oh, that's so funny you would say fear-mongering media. You know, one of the things that I knew that things were getting really bad with the coronavirus. First, after not saying anything for many weeks, the president of China said that the outbreak is accelerating, and that gave me deep concern, because it was a statement that would cause hysteria, and we've seen the hysteria spill out over here, and I noticed it in the early days of the coronavirus. I think the first case was in Seattle, I think. Maybe California, and it was a headline in CNN, first case of coronavirus in Seattle. It was a headline. 50-odd thousand people died last year of the flu. There was no headline every day of the flu count. And that's tragic. The loss of any life is tragic. But the headlines didn't fit the data. Like, the data, one person who was just infected was a headline. Like, oh my God, this isn't Ebola, right? The death rate in South Korea is about 1%. And even that, it's not a random 1%. You have to have a really weak immune system. Make no mistake, the coronavirus is bad, is real bad, but it's not Ebola bad. And yet the headlines were raising hysteria, and you use the phrase fear-mongering media, but I think it's really algorithms are doing it. The algorithms are generating the fear, because the web and everything we get served up, the internet is fear-mongering. Boom. Yeah. Internet is fear-mongering, because the internet knows that if it discovers algorithms, machine learning, whenever you mention coronavirus, someone clicks on that article. Well, right. Great. Let's just keep serving up those. And people who go, wait, what WTF? I see 2 coronavirus cases and it's a headline, people go, oh my God, what am I missing? It must be much worse than I realize. And so it generates a lot of panic. And to be sure, it is a danger. But so is the flu. Heck, crossing the street is dangerous. Driving a car in the United States, roughly 35,000 people die, 100 people every day, from car accidents. And yet we're not freaking out when we go outside about cars.
Right.
But they're dangerous. They're real dangerous. By the way, this is worth knowing. Hospitals are super dangerous. The current estimate of accidental deaths in hospitals, accidental deaths. In other words, not you went into the hospital with like you were having a heart attack and they couldn't save you. I mean, you went in with a broken arm and you didn't come out. The current estimate is between 210 and 440,000 deaths every year. Conservatively, 250,000 deaths every year in the United States from hospital error. That's not my estimate. Those are official estimates from error. Now, wait, that's during normal times. Wait, now imagine how many errors are going to occur when everyone's freaking out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just conservatively, I don't know, double. So the number of deaths that will occur from error are easily going to equal the number of deaths from the coronavirus itself. And, you know, a lot of people don't realize that firemen often die when, firefighters, they die, many of them, on the way to the fire. They get into accidents rushing on the way to the fire.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we've got a society now that's panicked about the coronavirus, and it's serious. But so is panic. Panic is serious. And you know, Lauren Taus, such a beautiful soul. She said in her Instagram feed today, she said that the earth is inviting us to, in quarantine, giving us a chance to reflect in our homes. And that's beautiful and it's true. Unfortunately, our leaders, and this is not a political statement, please. This is a nonpartisan statement. Because it doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, our leaders, including our corporate leaders, they aren't at home reflecting quietly and calmly. They're actively making decisions right now. And they're doing so in what I call the stupid zone. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If certain factors are present, you will make stupid decisions. It's an inevitable consequence of intelligence operating in a complex environment, and which is what we're in right now. So, yeah, this is real serious.
It's real serious, and it's really not going away. I've heard estimates that high impact zone is 3 to 6 months, and then we're going to be feeling this for about 18 months economically. I think way beyond that.
No. Remember, it's way more than 18 months.
Yeah.
Remember, even if the coronavirus had not hit, it was a house of cards.
Right.
Feeling the effects, this is just accelerating something that was already in place. So the government is right now and is going to distribute money, and that should be done. Absolutely, there should be bipartisan support. Shouldn't even be a question. People should not have to worry about their food, their rent, their jobs, or their taxes. They shouldn't actually have to worry about survival. And as a basic minimum. And I'm sure that will be passed. I'm sure that's going to go out, and it ought to go out. But that still leaves the problem of a world of debt that even in best case, before the coronavirus hit, 3-4 months ago, the US stock market was at all-time highs. It's lost a third of its value faster than at any time in history. It's down 5% at the start of trading on Sunday. It's limit down. Actually, as we talk, I'm gonna look and see what with no end in sight.
And I think that's the thing that some people feel like is over exaggerated. Some people think it's under exaggerated, the no end in sight. What is the ideal vision that you have for humanity on the other side of this transition?
But wait, remember, I don't ever state opinions. When I say there's no end in sight, there's no evidence of any stopping of the selling. And until I see evidence of that, then there's no end in sight. And so someone can say stocks are oversold, whatever that means, and they're undervalued. But stocks can go down a lot lower. I mean, they did in 2007. They fell 56%. In 2007, 8, and early 09. And in the Depression, worse. And 74, it was about 50, 60%. So this is bad. Even if we get past the coronavirus, it's still the human heart. Those Google answers, that's not post-coronavirus. That was pre-coronavirus. It still leaves us with the basic problem of a world that is not satisfying human needs.
Yeah.
And that's what's needed right now. The founding fathers had a vision of this monarchy thing isn't working, King George, and we're going to war with you because we have a vision of a better way of doing things. And it was a noble experiment. And it was Churchill who said democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others that we've tried. And I would agree. I would agree also that capitalism is the worst form of economic incentive, except for everything else. And that's where we are. It's the other stuff hasn't worked, and where we are in the world isn't working. It's left the human heart empty and in pain, and that pain that lashes out as anger and stupidity. So it will be up to millennials and Gen Zs, not in an angry way, to say that I'm not going to cite any public figures of young people talking about the environment, but let's talk about what kind of world you want. As really the role of the younger generations is to actually reject the old world and to offer a new world. This is the world we want to work towards, and that's what's missing in the world right now. So, yeah.
I agree with you. I think that through great breakdown comes breakthrough, and what we're actually experiencing right now is a creative renaissance. Absolutely tragic how much suffering, how much death is going to be happening. And at the same time, we have people for the first time ever having time to be still with themselves, which initially is deeply confronting. And I can only speak from my experience, having worked in corporate and then gone backpacking and working alone in my apartment, which is where most of the world is right now, working from home. You suddenly are confronted with the self, and there is a spiritual evolution that is happening regardless of whether people want it or not. We've all been thrown into the work from home ocean.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, the reflection and calm reflection, think of your family of 4 with no paycheck coming in. I promise you, you're not reflecting on your soul or anything. You're terrified about your kids. You're going to sleep every night wondering, how am I going to put food? How am I going to feed my kids? This is not a time where people are reflecting on, like Buddha,
I was thinking about more millennials, like people myself and younger, because you were talking about that generation, like
well,
taking
yeah.
it into our own hands.
Remember, well, that's true. The millennials, though, that have graduated from college are sitting on a mountain of debt,
Right.
And wondering now. Again, I am sure there will be a moratorium on loan payments. I am sure that'll get bipartisan support, and I know that the president is behind that. Everyone's behind that, but that'll just stop things. It's not. We still need a positive vision to pull us forward, not this isn't working. Like, everyone knows that. Like, we get that you're angry. Okay, come up with something, a positive vision that people can get excited about. And that's really what this is forcing on us. And unfortunately, we still have the problem of people in pain. And I agree. I mean, what you said and Lauren Taus, and we have the opportunity to reflect, and we become really aware of our friends. Like, actually, not being able to be sitting across from you is I'm smiling, but you're one of my dear hearts, and I'm like, we can't be together. So I feel that even in this interaction, because you're like 20 minutes away from me.
Yeah. On a personal note, what have you learned about yourself in the last 2 weeks, if anything at all, that has surprised you?
Nothing. This is nothing. I mean, this is, again, the world that we're in is a direct consequence of. I advise the heads of very large hedge funds on exactly this, on everything, stocks and bonds and currencies and geopolitical events. And so I saw this coming. So the fact that I can be in a room and look at the world from a computer screen, that hasn't changed anything. And the world doesn't seem crazy to me. It's so nothing has surprised me yet about myself. It's really the world. I'm surprised that our leaders and everyone haven't taken a step back and paused to reflect before they do anything. The Hippocratic Oath is first, do no harm. Right? Before you do anything, Mr. Doctor Guy, don't do any harm. And I would say that's true of for political and corporate leaders. First, and our central bankers. First, do no harm. And then let's pause and reflect about what we can do constructively. In the short term, there are immediate steps that need to be taken about quarantining and everything else, because the virus is still a threat to people, and so those steps need to be taken immediately. And this is not a time for political dissension right now and finger pointing. Right now, we have to take care of not doing any more harm, also as a country, to ourselves.
One of the things that I really hope this show does is gives people a practical toolbox of wisdom for how to navigate forward. What would you say are maybe 2 habits that you count on to stay joyful and inspired? One of the things I love about you is you bring light everywhere you go.
Okay, that's so I want to jump in and say 2 things about that. The first is, it's not a habit. Yesterday was my birthday, and the thing is that every morning I wake up and I can't wait to get out of my front door. I mean, I can't wait. I'm 6 years old on Christmas morning. I'm like this. I can't wait to get out the door because I know that I will encounter magic. I know this. I have no doubt, and I know it, and I always do. And so it's not a habit, it's just a mindset. It's really just a choice. And so I'm always on the prowl for there's a TV show back in the day, Punked, right, where these practical jokes are being played, and I assume that the universe is punking me all the time in a positive way. So I'm always on the alert. So that's really a mindset. But habit is a really good thing, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because people are thrown out of their normal habits, right? Most people's days are bracketed by, getting dressed, working out, maybe showering, going to work. It's, they have a good chunk of their day at work, and even their work is a series of habits and routines. At the end, it's bracketed by, going home. And so we've lost that structure, and everyone should create an artificial schedule at home. Not artificial. I mean, it's an actual schedule. And there's I know, in fact, Vika, I know you were talking about that. People working at home, they're going to need structure in the way that creative artists, how do you structure your day, right? I mean, you have to structure your day. You know about that. I do also, because we're self-employed. And so how do people who are now thrown on their own resources at home, you need to create structure within your day. You need to have routine. That's super important. And so, yeah, everyone should create, even if it's artificial. In other words, they can just say even if they didn't have to, they can just say from 8:30 to 9 o'clock, I'm going to get to work, which is from my bed over to my desk. And that's going to be my little commute. I mean, you can be playful about it, but you need to have structure within your day. Yeah. As the world outside is chaotic, you got to have order inside.
Meditating really helps me with that, twice a day, every day.
Okay, well, good. Well, so the meditating is an internal routine, but it's also a routine that you set aside same time every day. That's beautiful.
I did notice you're wearing 2 chains. Can you tell me why?
Oh, well, one of them, let me see. One of them is a ring. And it's next to my heart, and a deer heart gave me this, and it just reminds me, keep deer hearts close to your heart. Mm. And the other is a block of metal in chains, and it reminds me that the human species, that everyone is a slave. Who was it? Rousseau said, man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. And we become enslaved to a way of life, right? Consumerism. We become enslaved to that. And even thoughts, our thought patterns are forms of enslavement. And so I think it's just a reminder to not to become enslaved. Certainly not to be enslaved by other people's thoughts. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. We're going to take an intermission for a couple of minutes and give everyone a chance to upvote their favorite questions, because this is now going into the final 20, where you get to ask the questions that you've been dying to ask Adam and myself, and make these big questions, meaty questions, the questions that have been burning inside of you.
I feel like that show, Jeopardy, where they're all writing their final answer down. They ask a question
we should have themed music for this part of it.
Dun, 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 dun.
So we've got 13 votes, 14 votes now for one question. I'm gonna let Adam marinate on it. It says, Adam, you've been dropping hints that the virus is a distraction, only a small part of a larger game. Please tell me about this. What am I not seeing?
Well, I've already said we've got a global collapse, a global economic collapse. And the virus is, even once we get past it, is still a massive global unwind of debt. In modern times, the cycle of for the last century odd has been the accumulation of debt. We pile up debt, and then we run into trouble, and then we get a recession or a depression. That's the cycle. But all along, population was growing. So even though those debt busts, deflations were awful, still the population was growing. We're now on the other side of the mountain, and not in a good way. Now population is decreasing. So there's no, again, people talk about a recession or depression. That assumes that the economy is going to keep growing. The demographics for the next 30, 40 years are already written in stone. That we already know how many people will be alive and at what age over the next 20, 30, 40 years. We know that. And there's no changing it right now. And so we know that there's going to be this decline. And I don't think anyone's eager to consume on the other end to make up for it. Because the only way we've been able to do that is pile up more debt. And even the consumption at the end of the day has left us in pain.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like what we need is a post-consumerism way of being that connects us back to our spiritual origin.
Absolutely. Now, although, remember, we have to transition away from the obligations we've already piled up. Like, there's a lot of debt. There's things that people borrowed to build and borrowed to consume, and that has to be paid back. It's not like we can just decide, oh, today we're Buddha. Like even if we're enlightened and in debt. We're Buddha in debt, best case scenario.
So folks are asking, how do we get out of this global debt crisis that we've created?
But there's again,
question.
I will tell you that every time we've done it in the past has been super painful. There's no easy way out of that. And in fact, the only solution that the best minds have been able to come up with is more debt. And because it's so painful, think about it like this, that the number of unemployment applications over the last couple of weeks was a record high.
Oh. Like
record high. And so think about all the people. This is the gig economy, right? Like, there are a lot of people who are, and they're not going to be able to work right now, not for a while. And so there's going to be some serious adjusting going on. And we can pause, we can have a moratorium on the debt. And I'm sure a host of measures will be passed, I am sure. From the president down to the Congress, will pass measures to allay people's immediate cash needs. But the debt is still there. And again, the only solution in the past has been more debt, because we were sure we were going to grow, but we're not growing anymore. We're going the other way.
Is there any innovative way through the debt, even if it doesn't have a high likelihood? I'm just thinking kind of creative, out of the box ideas for how to get through this debt crisis.
Yeah, no, there's no easy way. And it's not like, no, the only solution that people have been able to come up with is print more money, go into more debt. By the way, when we say go into debt, really what that means is we're taking the obligations today and we're passing them on to the future.
Right.
That's what debt is. Debt is today's generations passing it on to future generations. And there's this notion in the modern world of that the future inherits the world from us. But in Native American tradition, it's the opposite. We today are borrowing the world from the future. Oh. And there's one of the problems with democracy is the people voting, even if everyone has an equal vote, it's people that are alive today. So there should be, in whatever new political form that we come up with, there's got to be a seat at the table, votes from future generations. There have to be, like, we were a republic, right? We had representatives for each state. There should be representatives from the future. In other words, representatives today,
Right.
we're representing the next 200 years.
Right.
And we know that you guys want to, go into debt, but we vote against it. Ixnay. Nope, we're not doing that.
So
And
speaking about the future, what are what surprising things could change in 5 years' time as a result of this pandemic was one of the questions.
What surprising things
could change in 5 years' time as a result of this pandemic?
I don't know how to answer that question. Like, what would surprise me? I mean, if I anticipate it, then it's not a surprise. So it's a little bit of a paradox. What
might surprise the world that you uniquely know because of who you are and what you do?
Oh, that even when they fix these problems, it's still, well, now everyone knows, everyone who's listened and reflects on their own soul, they'll realize that the life they've been living hasn't, not everybody, not everybody, but we did the Google experiment, right? That's not me talking, that's collective searches of everybody. And so this is an opportunity. Actually, I will invite young people. There should be like a youth congress. In 1787, there was a constitutional congress to vote on, in the states and the federal government working out a constitution. And there needs to be a vision of the future that excite at least millennials and Gen Zs. That has to happen. And so I think that would surprise me. Wouldn't astonish me, but I hope that happens. It better happen.
Yeah. When this, let's say 6 months from now, we don't talk, what do you see as, I wish it would be impossible. What would you see as best case scenario versus realistic to a kind of more darker case scenario of where the world turns 6 months from now?
Well, Americans, one of America's great, I'll just deal with America for now. By the way, I'm not, this is a global problem, but I'll just deal with America now. And one thing that Americans have always done well in a crisis is come together. And the crisis, in the past, the crisis has always been very clear what it was, who the enemy was. And now it's a crisis of another sort. And we've got a financial crisis and a health crisis and a financial crisis and a soul crisis. And I'm going to invite Americans to remember that we've always come together around a crisis. And if ever there was some time we needed to come together, it's around this. Let's all agree this is a crisis. And blaming and being angry is not helpful. Remember, if you want to change people's thinking, you can invite them to consider new questions or invite them to consider more inspired answers to the questions they're already asking. Being angry just polarizes things. It does not invite people to consider new questions or new answers. And it's clear the old questions. How can we grow faster? Right? One of the problems with technology, someone asked me once what 3 words characterize artificial intelligence? And I said, relentless, optimizing, and unforgiving. And that's the modern world that we've built. Relentless, optimizing, and unforgiving. And technology has just ensured that we've gone to the wrong place faster and with more efficiency. No wonder people are angry. We need to set that aside and come up with something people can be excited about. And I think, again, being at home, we can see that actually we can do without a lot of things. I'm living in a hotel, a nice hotel in West Hollywood, and I have 2 drawers full of clothes, and I'll clean them. And there are a lot more clothes and books at home, and I'm fine. I'm fine. So we learn we can get by. We learn we don't need as much, and that was Lawrence House's point. And you've said that also, Vika. And we can learn we can get by, but there's still the crisis. And even once we pass the coronavirus crisis, there's still the financial crisis and the loneliness epidemic. So this is the perfect time for us to reflect on what we want as people, and we got to come together for that.
Yeah. So what would I love that you took 3 words to describe AI. If you could take 3 words to describe your hope for humanity during this crisis, what would those 3 words be?
I'll sum it up with 1: choice.
Choice. Okay.
Choice. Everything is a choice ultimately, and I would invite people to consider. And I actually tweeted about this today. What would life feel like if joy were a choice? What would life feel like if your future were a choice? I'm not telling you it's a choice, but what would it feel like? And even my saying that, I'm sure like certain emotions arise. And what if life were a choice? And I'm going to share with people a story written by Ray Bradbury, and it's a really beautiful story, and it's called The Toynbee Convector. And I'm going to collapse it in a few minutes. So the year is, I'm just making this up. It's January 3rd, 2101. And the world is this awful dystopia, right? January 3rd, 2101. It's like Blade Runner, but worse. There's pandemics, global war, pollution everywhere. Human beings dying from crime or pollution or war or anything. It's just the worst dystopia. And yet today, the entire world is excited because a visitor from the future has arrived. Exactly. And he holds a press conference, and the entire world is riveted. And the first question is, what year are you from? Like, he appears out of nowhere in this like machine, and he holds a press conference, and the entire world is riveted. And the first question is, from what year are you from? And he says, I'm from exactly 100 years in the future. And I go, wow. Like, how did that work? And he said, well, I don't really understand it. I created this machine. I don't understand the physics, but I left here from exactly 100 years in the future, January 3rd, 2201. And they said, why'd you come here? And he said, because I knew that you'd want to hear from someone in the future. And they said, why? Like, are you like the last human survivor? Is that why you came back? Because it's not a whole lot better here now. Like why'd you come back here? He said, I could only come back. This is the only time I could come to, and I can't go back. I'm stuck here. And they said, well, what's it like in the future? They said, how many people are still alive on the planet? He said, what do you mean? They said, well, like, have the wars killed off everyone? And he says, oh, yeah, that's right. I forget. There hasn't been a war in 57 years. And they go, what? Like, yeah, no war in 57 years. Really? He's trying to remember, because remember, he's from 100 years in the future. He goes, yeah. I think the last one was about 57 years ago. No more wars. And they go, well, what about the pandemics? And he thinks for a while, and he goes, yeah, no, I think the human lifespan now is measured in, he says, I'm in my early 30s. Human lifespan is now measured in centuries, multiple centuries. There's no more disease. We basically, live as long as we want to live. Like, really? Wow. Well, what about crime? And he says, no, there are no more laws. No, that's it. I don't think there's been a crime committed in like 13 years. And they go, well, this is amazing. And he goes, well, yeah. And he said, I knew you'd want to know that. I knew you had no hope. So I've written down, I took notes before I came here of everything that happens for the next 100 years. I studied the history books, I summarized it, and I know what's going to happen for the next 100 years. I'll just tell you. And so the next year, he tells them what to expect for the next year, and that comes to pass. And the next year and the next year, he tells everyone what's going to happen, and then it's now 100 years later. And of course, he's from the future. This wasn't an alternative timeline. It's exactly what he said. But we would expect that, right? He was from the future. And he's now the most revered man on the planet. He's 135. And he also, remember, the lifespan then was in multiple centuries, but he came back. He's very old. But he's the most revered man on the planet. He saved the entire planet. And everyone is excited today because today is the day he will see himself get in the time machine and go back in time. He'll be able to wave to himself. So the entire planet, he's like, think the most honored man of all time. He saved the planet. He's now old and he's going to see himself as a young man get into his time machine. So the entire world, billions of people watching. And he's in his hotel room and he calls a young journalist into his room. And the young journalist, young man, is honored. And he says, why did you select me? Of all the people, you're going to come out and make an announcement and see yourself get into the time machine. He says, yeah, but I wanted to have an audience with you. And the young man says, well, I'm really honored. Why? And he says, well, I've followed your work and I think I can trust you. And the young man says, what? He says, well, I have a confession to make. And the young man says, what? And he says, I'm not from the future. And the journalist goes, what? And he goes, I'm not from the future. I got to confess I'm a fraud. And the journalist goes, wait, I don't understand. I know the history books. I'm a young man. I wasn't there 100 years ago, but they said you showed up in a time machine. He said, I'm a magician. That was all smoke and mirrors. I made that up. I'm from Vegas. And the journalist was trying to figure this out, but he said, wait a second, everything, you had the notebooks. These are in the Smithsonian now. Like, well, they're not in the Smithsonian because you kept them. You didn't want people to get ahead of themselves. These notebooks will be in the Smithsonian. And he said, yeah, I made the whole thing up. Just a complete lark. I just thought no one had any hope, so I just made it up. I figured what would be a really nice world where people lived, that old John Lennon song, Imagine, I just created it. And then I worked backwards and I wrote it all down and I showed up. I didn't just show up. I lied. And I feel real bad about that I lied to everybody, but look at what I've created. And I'm an old man. In fact, the reason I called you into my room, I don't think I'm going to survive the afternoon. And I'm going to entrust you with my notebooks. And you need to see that this gets out into the world. The world needs to know that, I made it all up. And sure enough, a few minutes later, he peacefully departs this realm. A saint.
Wow.
And the young man looks at him and looks at the notebooks, and there's a fireplace, and he takes the notebooks and tosses them in the fireplace because he doesn't want the world to find out that it was just all a lie. And he called it a beautiful lie. And but that's what I love that story because it shows that without a vision pulling us forward, a positive vision, we're lost and angry. So it's needed now is a positive vision that people can get excited about. And again, defeating the coronavirus, well, okay, that's good. That would be good. But what then? Right? Even before the coronavirus, people were lost and in pain. Still got to deal with that. And there's more to life than consuming and making things faster, which we've gotten really good at. We've gotten really good at making people feel empty and lost.
Yeah, big business really thrives on that. I think the entire beauty industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, thrives on making women feel like they're not enough. One of the questions, and thank you for that beautiful story, is how do we navigate the unknown with so much fear around us?
Navigate the unknown. Well, we just choose, right? I mean, the founding fathers of this country, they were rejecting a monarchy, and they had a vision about what might work. And they even had provisions within the Constitution, like, we don't expect this to work forever, so we're actually going to build in ways to change this if it's not meeting your needs, right? You'd think there would have been like a global constitution, like, let's change things because it's clearly not working. Not working for anyone except those who play the current game really well. And one of my heroes, Warren Buffett, when he was 12 in 1942, a lot of people don't know this about him. When he was 12 in 1942, this is the Depression, and leading into World War II, really tough times. And his father, and Warren revered his father, took him from Omaha to New York City. And actually, this is a good note. Maybe people have a few more questions, but I really would like to, this beautiful point I want to make. He takes his son to the New York Stock Exchange. 12-year-old Warren, during the Depression, tells his dad, I'm going to become the richest man in the world so I can give it all away. Yeah, a 12-year-old boy told his dad, whom he revered, I want to become the richest man in the world so that I can give it all away. And that's what he's done. And he inspired a lot of other people to give their money away also. And, it's interesting. One of the reasons that I love Warren so much, if you go back and look at interviews of Warren, like 30, 40 years, doesn't matter, interview or his speeches, there's one word that appears in almost every interview or speech he's ever given. So I didn't tell you what the word was, did I?
Mm-mm.
Okay, guess. World's wealthiest man. Well, one of them. World's certainly greatest investor.
Love.
Well, okay, that's a little more spiritual. No, not love. That hasn't appeared, I don't think, in too many Berkshire Hathaway annual reports.
Hope or future?
Oh, yeah. Fun.
Fun.
Yeah.
Huh.
Fun. And really, in almost every interview he's ever given, going back quite a while, a number of decades, the word fun appears in almost every one. That's his way of having fun, is investing. But if it was playing the ukulele, I'm sure he would have just played the ukulele.
That is a really...
And so investing was just a means for him to have fun. And having had fun his whole life, and he continues to have fun and continues to go to work, as does his partner Munger, he will, he's going to give it all away. And in the meantime, he's having fun. So actually that's what Warren Buffett has shown us. Have fun. Like, have fun. And if you're having fun, you'll have fun at the very least. And if you're good at what you do, which becomes easier if you're having fun, you'll make some money. And worst case scenario, you've had a lot of fun.
I like that note to end on. Adam, I have had such an incredible time for the last hour and a half speaking, and I wanted people to have an opportunity to also read your works, because I remember taking one of the books, The Invitation to the Great Game, while I was traveling, and it led to so much magic. And I think at a time like this, we could all use a little Adam Robinson in our back pocket on our library shelves. So where can we get your...
You can't get them yet. I promise people, mind you, you got that book 3 years ago.
I know.
And so I've sat on these books, and How Not to Be Stupid, I wrote last year. And this year, wait, hold on. This is, it's backwards, but Warning
Stories.
Yeah, this is, so there, and this, I'm just donating just to charity, because that's what they did. And I'll have another couple of books. I promise in the next few weeks, I'll release them. I'll release at least one of them, and then the other two over the following couple of months. But I'll release them. I've sat on them for too long.
Great. And the best way to follow you?
Instagram or Twitter. I am Adam Robinson.
Okay, wonderful. And in the spirit of generosity, what I really have a vision for this show is to feed children that are not getting fed. So so I thought it would be really cool if you derived any joy or value from this conversation and just wanted to drop a couple of bucks. There will be a donate button that I'm prompting. So my goal is to help all of the children who are going hungry during this pandemic, because we know that the kids are the first ones to suffer when their moms and dads are on the front line. Any parting words or questions that you want us to marinate on?
Yes. For each of you, remember that everything human is an answer to one or more questions. And you need to be clear as individuals, whether it's as an employee of a company or even in relationships, what questions are you asking for which the other person is or is not the answer? And that's because the world is falling apart. The questions we're asking of each other are in flux now. And so I think one of the things everyone can do now is ask him or herself. By the way, there's a big contribute sign in front of me. I can't quite see you. I hope you can see me.
I can. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, I can't see myself, which is okay. I'm blocked with this contribute thing, which is very beautiful. So ask yourself, what questions are you asking yourself about the world and about your future and about the people in it? And, okay, one last thing, one last gift. Everyone pick a date sometime in the future, a specific date, more than a year away from now. And for reasons that'll become clear in a second. But less than 5, say 2 years-ish, pick a specific day and write down, call it my perfect day. And write down, use the time now at home to compose what your perfect day would be like 2 years from now. But not 2 years of vague 2 years, like pick a specific date, like September 21st, 2022. Pick a specific date and describe what that day would be like, your perfect day. And maybe if we all do that, we can start to think about what kind of society would support our perfect days. And so there. Okay.
Oh, that one hit really deep. And thank you for being you exactly as you are. I feel tremendously grateful for the privilege of our lifelong friendship. And you were the first to jump on board because you believe in the power of these kinds of conversations and curious questions. So, Adam, keep shining. You're such a gift to this world, and we look forward to your books. I will definitely send out notifications when your books come available online.
Yeah, but by the way, the Warren and Charlie's bedtime story, I'm giving away all the profits.
Incredible.
So I don't know how to do this, but if someone shows me how to do it, all the profits from this are going to some charity, because that's what Buffett has done. So in honor of Buffett, so Warren and Charlie's bedtime story, we can do that, and NoKidHungry.org sounds like a pretty good one to start with. So there, I'll release that one first.
All right, beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and put the donate button back on. I didn't realize it was blocking Adam's handsome face. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can just feel how thrilled everybody is for this very needed conversation. And I want you guys to know that I'm committed to doing this show every Sunday night so that we start the week with that kind of hope and optimism, so that we can reimagine narratives, so that we can move through this with solidarity and give ourselves that spiritual revolution that we've been seeking. Now is the time to pause and reflect and imagine a brighter future for our children.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot of love to everybody on here. If you want to follow me, I am on Instagram at Vika Gets Curious, Vika Victoria on Facebook, and VikaGetsCurious.com. Thank you all for being part of the very first episode of the New Now Live Talks with Vika, happening every Sunday night from here until infinity.
Congratulations, Vika. Wow.
Oh, I'm so excited. This was better than I could have imagined. You're wonderful. I love you. Big hugs. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all for being part of this.
I'm going to say something too. Oh, I can't.
You can say it.
I tried.
This is the after show.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I had the best time. Didn't we have fun?
That was so good. I just, I still have questions. You know, like when you leave a conversation with more questions than answers, you have done your job.
Good. Good. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. And I know we probably left some parentheticals open. We should have outtakes. We should have really funny outtakes. In fact, you know what we really have? This should be, I tell you, I have a real fondness for Bollywood movies. So I would love to just break out in a dance, like a Bollywood routine right here. I would just love to dance. But a Bollywood dance.
How do we Bollywood dance? I think it's.
Oh no, they're much cooler. It's much. Well, I love traditional Indian dance, but the Bollywood dance is actually really hip. It's like hip hop plus that, and It's very cool, very sexy, very cool, fun. And what I love about Bollywood movies is pretty much like any provocation, they'll just all break out into dance.
Yeah.
And
have you been to an Indian wedding?
I have not. I have
Oh
not.
my gosh, Adam, I have to take you. It is, so my best friend from high school got married to an Indian man, and they rehearsed for months, and they surprised each other with these intricate 6-minute long Bollywood dances. And you're totally right. It was like hip hop meets Bollywood dancing. People were just like dropping buckets of sweat, but it was so animated and so alive, and you could just like feel that life force energy.
Yeah, you know what? Like that would be something that everyone could do in the United States. Here, I'm gonna propose that right now. We just all learn a Bollywood routine, and then when we can go out in public, imagine everyone just breaks out into dance, right?
Like that would mob our way through Corona.
Yeah, but really practice, and there I know so many performers like Ruby Chase, and there are others, and Katya Lee. There's so many people who are singing, performing, Farrah Sabado. Wow. And just lead us all in dance.
Yeah.
Like a big Bollywood dance. That's my, you know what? I'm going to go to Congress and propose the Bollywood bill, and everyone get lessons, and you could do it at home, right? We have the mirror, right? We could all learn a Bollywood dance, and that would be good. We have ties with India, and
question: what have you been, since this is the after show and we're still live with folks? Is there any piece of entertainment that you have watched that has given you joy?
Yes. Should be assigned viewing. I can't believe I didn't say this earlier. Slumdog Millionaire.
Yes.
That should be required viewing of everyone. So put aside your books on Stoicism, put aside Rumi, put aside, all of which are brilliant and beautiful. Slumdog Millionaire. Everyone should watch that movie and watch it as a parable of life. And in it, it reveals some secrets. And I think unwittingly, but there's a real secret revealed in the movie. And if anyone who watches the movie and DMs me out and asks me what the secret, and tells me what they think the secret is, I'll tell them whether I'll give other hints. But there's a secret. It reveals the secret to serendipity, and reveals the secret to good fortune, and how to get the universe actually working in your favor. So right. There, watch that.
Okay, I like that. Is there any book you've read 3 times or more?
Oh, tons, too many to like. All of Emerson's essays, Zen and the Art of Archery. I've read one of my great heroes, Bruce Lee, The Art of Jeet Kune Do, and really one of the great philosophers. People don't realize that. I mean, arguably the greatest martial artist of all time and a philosopher. Yeah, I mean, those for starters. Yeah, I mean, tons of books. Really, any book reading once is worth reading twice.
Yes.
And then once you've read it a second time, you go, oh man, I got to read it again because I learned more stuff. And
any advice for dating in the age of Corona for all the single people out there?
Well, count me one of them. Really, the thing is still comes back to my perfect day. And when you start with your perfect day and you decide what that day is like, then whoever you're dating or not. The only question is that person going to ever fit into my perfect day? And if not, they could be a wonderful friend or colleague or whatever. But I think focus on your perfect day, and everything else will then fit in within that. I about a year ago, I said, unless you consciously choose your script, you're going to be unconsciously living someone else's. And that's not good. So you got to write your own script, and maybe start with the perfect day. And yeah. And include some Bollywood dances in there. I mean, for sure.
We're going to have to FaceTime some Bollywood dancing in the coming week.
Yeah. I'm going to find some way to Photoshop my face onto some scenes, and me doing Bollywood dancing. But that really would be cool. There. Someone, the Bollywood party, just the fun party. I think that would be a good.
We'll have a party. Well, thank you for joining for the after show. Sending everyone a big hug. Strong kickoff to the week. Be kind to each other. I know that family tensions are really tough. I've experienced it inside my own. Ram Dass famously said, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. So just be loving. Everyone's going through their own individual confrontation in this process. So be more tender and more understanding and more flexible than usual with your family, because we're not really speaking to anyone as often as we are our families right now. And so there's naturally going to be tensions that arise and personality types within the family. And that's my little bit of advice for the week ahead. All right. And call your friends the second they come to mind. Like literally, that's one of the things I love now, having the time to say, oh, Adam came to mind. I'm going to text him. I'm going to give him a call. So just keep spilling out all the love that's inside of you, because now we have no excuses, no meetings, no traditional structures. We definitely are busy, but I think human connection in the age of isolation means that we really make the effort to let other people know we're connected to them.
Yeah.
All right, sweet dreams, everybody. I'm going to go rent Slumdog Millionaire. A lot of love. Bye.